Bergen Belsen, once a prisoner of war camp, became one of the most infamous Nazi concentration camps by the end of World War II. Known for its horrific conditions, rampant disease, starvation, and mass death, the camp stands as a chilling symbol of the Holocaust's brutal reality. Among its perpetrators were not only male SS officers, but also a significant number of female guards, whose role in the suffering and deaths of thousands has often been underrepresented in historical narratives. These women were not passive bystanders. They held ranks, issued orders, inflicted beatings, and contributed directly to the system of cruelty that defined Bergen Belsen. Their participation was not incidental. It was structured, systematic, and ideologically driven. This script will explore who these women were, what they did, how they operated within the Nazi machinery, and how they were held accountable, if at all, in the aftermath of the war. Bergen Belsen began in 1940 as a camp for prisoners of war, but by 1943 evolved into a concentration camp, primarily holding Jews, political prisoners, and other groups targeted by the Nazi regime. Unlike extermination camps like Auschwitz, Bergen Belsen had no gas chambers. Yet it became a death camp through calculated neglect, rampant disease, starvation, and overcrowding led to tens of thousands of deaths in the final months of the war. The Nazi SS oversaw the camp's operations, and female guards, known as Aufseherinnen, were integral to its structure. These women were not drafted but volunteered or were recruited through Nazi labor programs. Many came from working-class backgrounds and were often enticed by the promise of authority, pay, and uniforms. They underwent training at camps like Ravensbrück, where cruelty was institutionalized. Once stationed at Bergen Belsen, these women held real power. Some were block leaders or oversaw work details, others participated in selections and enforced punishment. Though women made up a minority of SS personnel, their impact was disproportionate. Their authority extended over life and death, especially in the final chaotic months when the camp's population swelled beyond its capacity and suffering intensified. Understanding Bergen Belsen's structure and the recruitment of female guards is essential to grasp the systemic nature of their crimes. These women operated within a framework that enabled, if not encouraged, brutality as a function of camp discipline and racial ideology. Several female SS guards at Bergen Belsen gained infamy for their exceptional cruelty. Among the most notorious was Irma Gress, often called the Beautiful Beast. Just 22 years old, Gress was known for her sadistic behavior, beatings with a whip, unleashing dogs on inmates, and personally selecting prisoners for death. She quickly rose through the ranks and was eventually convicted and hanged after the Belsen trials. Elisabeth Volkenroth, the camp's senior female overseer, had previously served at Auschwitz. At Bergen Belsen, she maintained authority over all female guards and was responsible for enforcing brutal discipline and overseeing selections. Like Grez, she was sentenced to death for war crimes. Herta Both was another feared figure, often seen beating prisoners and marching them to exhaustion. Though she claimed she was merely following orders, witnesses described her as violent and merciless. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Others, like Irene Haschka and Annalisa Coleman, arrived late in the war but were still implicated in abuse and mistreatment. Their presence shows that cruelty was not isolated to a few bad actors, but was ingrained in the system. These women did not act alone. They were part of a machinery designed for suffering. Life in Bergen Belsen was full of constant fear, pain, and cruelty. The female guards played a major role in making daily life unbearable. Their violence wasn't just random, it was part of the camp's system to break the prisoners in body and spirit. Beatings happened every day. Guards hit people for almost anything, walking too slow, not standing straight, or just looking tired. Irma Grez was known for using a whip and kicking prisoners until they collapsed. Some guards made prisoners kneel for hours in the mud or forced them to do hard exercises until they fainted. Food was scarce. The little bread or watery soup prisoners received was often taken away or delayed by guards as punishment. Many inmates starved to death. Some survivors recalled seeing guards eat full meals in front of starving prisoners, even laughing as they did it. Dogs were used as weapons. Trained to attack on command, these dogs were let loose on prisoners, biting, mauling, and terrifying them. Herta Both was known for yelling at prisoners and hitting them with wooden sticks or rifle butts if they couldn't move fast enough. Punishments could be deadly. People were locked in overcrowded huts with no food or water. Others were made to dig graves for the hundreds of bodies that piled up daily. Even when prisoners were sick with typhus or dysentery, guards beat them or dragged them outside in the cold. This wasn't just cruelty, it was part of how the camp worked. The female guards weren't acting on their own. They were part of a system that encouraged violence and treated prisoners as less than human. Survivors of Bergen Belsen have described the female guards as some of the most terrifying figures in the camp. Many still remembered their faces and voices decades later, haunted by the violence they witnessed. One survivor recalled how Irma Grease would smile while beating prisoners, sometimes using her whip without saying a word. Others said she would walk through the barracks with her dog, letting it attack anyone who looked too weak. Several witnesses remembered her wearing heavy boots and using them to kick women in the stomach or face. Some guards were known for dragging sick or dying prisoners out of the barracks and throwing them into piles of corpses. One woman testified that she saw a female guard beat a pregnant prisoner until she lost consciousness. Another said a guard forced her to carry the body of her dead friend to a burial pit. British soldiers who liberated the camp in April 1945 documented the horrific scenes they found. Thousands of bodies lay unburied, and the survivors were so weak they could barely stand. The liberators forced SS guards, male and female, to help bury the dead. Photographs and film taken at the time captured the guards' stunned faces as they were finally confronted with the scale of the horror. These testimonies and images provide undeniable proof of the guards' roles in the abuse and suffering at Bergen Belsen. The violence they inflicted was not hidden. It was witnessed, remembered, and eventually used as evidence in court. After the liberation of Bergen Belsen, the British forces arrested many of the SS staff, including female guards. These women were later put on trial during the Belsen trials, held between September and November 1945. It was one of the first major war crimes trials after World War II. A total of 16 female guards were charged, alongside male SS officers and camp doctors. Survivors testified about the abuse they had endured, identifying specific guards like Irma Grace, Elizabeth Volkenrath, and Herta Both. Their stories, supported by physical evidence and photographs, helped the court understand the full horror of the camp. Irma Grace and Elizabeth Volkenrath were both found guilty of war crimes and sentenced to death. They were executed by hanging in December 1945. Herta Both received a 10-year prison sentence but was released early in 1951. Other female guards were given shorter sentences or acquitted, often due to lack of clear evidence or because their crimes were harder to prove. Still, the trials set an important precedent. Women, too, could be held responsible for war crimes. Unfortunately, many lower-ranking female guards escaped justice altogether. In post-war Germany, public interest in pursuing them faded over time. Some were quietly reintegrated into society, never facing trial or punishment for what they had done. Even so, the Belsen trials revealed how deeply involved women were in the Nazi system of cruelty and showed that their actions had legal and moral consequences. The crimes committed by female guards at Bergen Belsen were not isolated acts of cruelty. They were part of a system designed to dehumanize and destroy. These women were trained, uniformed, and given authority by the SS. They followed orders, enforced rules, and actively contributed to the suffering of thousands. Many were motivated by Nazi beliefs about race, power, and duty. Some enjoyed the power they held over helpless prisoners. Others may have feared punishment if they refused to follow orders. But many survivors believed the cruelty went beyond obedience. The violence often seemed personal, even enthusiastic. Importantly, these women were not passive bystanders. They played active roles in a genocide. Their gender did not make them less capable of evil, nor did it excuse their actions. By recognizing the systematic role of female guards, we get a fuller, more honest picture of how the Holocaust happened and who made it possible. The female guards of Bergen Belsen were not rare exceptions. They were part of a larger system of terror. Their actions caused immense suffering and death, carried out under the Nazi regime's cruel design. As we remember these crimes, one question remains: how many others escaped justice and were never held accountable?